I walked into the restaurant with my parents, feeling the kind of nervous energy you get when you know you don't belong somewhere. The place smelled of roasted garlic and butter, and every table glittered with polished silver. My sister Jessica sat near the center with a crowd around her, smiling like she owned the entire room. Technically, she did. It was her celebration dinner. I kept my head down and slid into my chair, trying not to make eye contact. The family was already buzzing about how wonderful Jessica was, how beautiful the place looked, how she had done so well for herself. I pressed my napkin into my lap and focused on my water glass. The meal hadn't even started when Jessica's sharp voice cut through the noise. "You don't belong here, Ren," she announced, loud enough for every person at the table to hear. A few forks stopped clinking. My uncle looked away. Jessica lifted her hand and waved toward the corner. "Excuse me, can someone please come over here? Security." My stomach dropped. I thought she was joking, trying to embarrass me. But then I saw a woman in a black uniform stride across the dining room. Her expression was firm, no nonsense. Murmurs spread as heads turned. "She's disrupting everything," Jessica said, pointing straight at me as though I were some kind of intruder. "She's not welcome here. Please remove her." Heat climbed up my neck. Every relative stared. A couple of investors, men in sharp suits who clearly had no idea about our family history, watched me with faint smirks as if the drama was entertainment. My father rubbed his temples, but he didn't say a word. My mother looked down at her plate. No one defended me. The guard stopped beside me. She leaned in, her voice low but steady. "I know who you are," she said. "And I know what she did." I blinked at her, caught off guard. For a moment, I didn't understand. Then Jessica's voice rang out again. "Well, what are you waiting for? Get her out of here." The guard straightened, turning her gaze on Jessica. The silence around the table grew heavy. "With all respect, ma'am," she said clearly so everyone could hear, "I won't be removing her. Not tonight." The room froze. Jessica's smile faltered, just for a second, before she plastered it back on. My chest tightened, not with shame anymore, but with the shock of someone, anyone, standing up for me. I looked around the table, at all the faces pretending not to know what to say. My hands shook as I pushed my chair back. My voice was barely a whisper when I finally spoke. And then, heart pounding, I began to explain how I ended up in that chair, in that room, with my sister calling security on me. Growing up with Jessica, as my sister always felt like living in someone else's shadow. I was the younger one, the quiet one, the one who kept things steady. I did my homework on time, I helped around the house, I stayed out of trouble. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. Jessica sparkled in every room she entered, and everyone, especially our parents, saw only that sparkle. She knew how to play it too. If I spent weeks working on a school project, Jessica would glance at it the night before, and somehow end up being the one praised at the dinner table for helping. If I practiced for a spelling bee, she'd find a way to tell our parents it was because she quizzed me, not because I studied. When I got good grades, they were expected. When Jessica brought home anything half decent, she was celebrated like she'd won a medal. I remember once in middle school, I worked on a painting for weeks. I poured everything into it, colors, details, shading. The day of the school art show, Jessica walked in, smiled at the judges, and charmed them into thinking she'd help me create it. I watched my parents beam with pride at her, not me, and when I tried to correct them, they brushed me off. "Don't be petty, Ren. She's your sister. Be happy she's proud of you." That became the line I heard most of my life. Don't be petty. Don't be jealous. Jessica had a way of bending the truth until it served her. She never got punished for it. If she lied, it was excused. If she broke something, it was my fault for leaving it where she could trip over it. If she shouted at me, my parents told me I must have provoked her. I learned early that in our family, Jessica's word weighed more than mine, no matter the situation. I swallowed it for years. I told myself it wasn't worth fighting. She could have the spotlight if that's what she wanted. I focused on being reliable, on staying out of her games. But resentment grew slowly inside me. It built with every time my ideas were brushed aside, only for Jessica to repackage them and take credit. It built with every time my parents patted her shoulder while telling me to work harder. The truth was, I never expected fairness anymore. I knew Jessica would always win in their eyes. What I didn't know was how far she'd go once we were adults, when the stakes weren't just paintings or projects or little shows at school. The moment she reached into my world and grabbed the one dream I had been building for myself, that was the moment the resentment I'd been holding on to turned into something sharper. That was when I stopped being quiet. For years, I carried one dream that felt like it belonged only to me. I wanted to open a restaurant. Not some fancy chain or overpriced spot, but a place that felt warm, where people could eat food made from local farms and know exactly where it came from. I worked late nights after my regular job, sketching menus, researching farmers around town, even visiting weekend markets just to talk to people who grew the kind of produce I wanted to use. Slowly, I started putting the pieces together. I met someone who seemed just as excited as I was, a colleague of a friend who had experience with small businesses. We sat in coffee shops for hours, talking about locations, costs, and how to keep prices fair while still paying workers well. For the first time, I could see my dream taking shape. It wasn't just notes on paper anymore. It was real plans with numbers and names attached. Of course, I made the mistake of telling Jessica. I thought maybe, just once, she'd be happy for me. We were adults now, right? Maybe things could be different. She smiled when I told her, asked 100 questions about the details, even said she admired my dedication. I wanted to believe her. A few weeks later, the calls from my potential partner slowed down. He stopped showing up to meetings, didn't reply to emails. At first I thought he'd lost interest, but then I found out the truth. Jessica had gone to him behind my back. She painted herself as the better choice, more outgoing, more connected, more ambitious. Somehow, she convinced him to leave me out of the project completely and start working with her instead. When I confronted him, he looked embarrassed but didn't deny it. He told me Jessica had a bigger vision and seemed like she could handle the pressure better. I sat there in shock, realizing my sister hadn't just borrowed one of my ideas this time. She had stolen my entire dream out from under me. I went home and cried that night, the kind of crying that leaves you empty afterward. My notes, my research, my visits to farmers, all of it felt useless now. Jessica had taken everything and walked away smiling. When I told my parents what had happened, I hoped deep down that this time they'd see how wrong it was. Instead, my mother patted my hand and said, "Ren, be happy for your sister. She's just more ambitious than you." My father nodded along, as if that explained everything. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them ambition doesn't excuse betrayal. But the words stuck in my throat. Jessica had won again, and not only had she stolen my work, she had managed to make it look like I was the one being unreasonable for being upset. That was the night I realized just how far she was willing to go. The invitation came as a group text from Jessica, as if it were some casual get-together. But this was no ordinary dinner. It was the big unveiling of her new restaurant, the one she had built on the bones of my dream. My first instinct was to refuse. The thought of walking into that place, seeing her smile in front of all the people who believed in her, made me feel sick. I told my mother I wasn't going. She didn't even pause before replying. "Ren, don't be difficult. She's your sister. You need to show support." So I went. The restaurant looked beautiful, I'll give her that. Warm lights glowed over polished tables, candles flickered at every setting, and servers in crisp uniforms carried trays of wine. The walls had that rustic style I had once sketched in my own notebook. Wooden beams, framed pictures of farms, baskets of fruit displayed like art. I recognized every detail, every choice, because I had planned them first. Jessica was in her element, moving from table to table in a shimmering dress, greeting investors like they were lifelong friends. Her laughter filled the room, high and polished. She leaned in close to shake hands, to clink glasses, to make people feel they were lucky just to be near her. Our family sat at one of the long tables in the middle. Relatives who hadn't seen us in months were all smiles, telling Jessica how proud they were. Family friends nodded in approval, impressed by her vision. The investors at our table asked her about expansion, about her plans for the future, about how she came up with such a unique idea. Each time, she answered as if she had been the one who had spent years dreaming it up. I sat quietly, my napkin folded tight in my lap. Every word she spoke dug deeper, but I kept my eyes on my plate. No one asked me a thing. It was as if I didn't exist at all, as if I were just another chair at the table. My parents smiled, soaking up the admiration aimed at Jessica, never once glancing at me. She kept bragging, saying how much work it had taken, how she had sacrificed so much to get here. People gasped, nodding, raising their glasses to toast her. I wanted to tell them the truth, to stand up and shout it, but I knew how it would look. In a room full of people praising Jessica, my words would sound like bitterness, like jealousy. So I stayed silent, shrinking smaller and smaller in my chair, my presence fading while Jessica shined brighter under the lights. For everyone else, it was a night of celebration. For me, it felt like sitting front row at the play, where someone else had stolen my part and performed it perfectly, while I was forced to clap from the audience. The air around the table grew heavy once Jessica turned her eyes on me. She smiled, that same practiced smile she always used when she wanted to hurt me without looking cruel. "So, Ren," she said sweetly, "how's that little desk job going? Must be nice, sitting behind a computer while the rest of us actually accomplish things." A few people chuckled. I stared at my plate, willing myself not to react, but she wasn't done. "I mean, not everyone is cut out to build something like this," she said, sweeping her hand around as if the restaurant itself was proof of her brilliance. Some people are meant to stay small, and that's fine. We can't all be leaders. Her gaze locked onto me as she sipped her wine. My hands tightened in my lap. I tried to breathe, to let it slide off me like I always did, but each word dug deeper. She leaned closer, her voice dripping with fake kindness. But don't worry, Ren. You'll find something eventually. Maybe a hobby. Knitting. Gardening. That was it. I couldn't sit there and let her keep painting me as a failure in front of everyone. I set my fork down and looked straight at her. My voice came out quiet but clear. This restaurant wasn't your idea, Jessica. You know that. The room fell silent. My mother lowered her eyes, my father shifted uncomfortably, and our relatives all pretended to study their plates. No one spoke. Jessica froze, her smile flickering for just a second before she put on a show. "Excuse me?" she said loudly, pressing a hand to her chest like I had struck her. "Are you really accusing me of stealing?" At my own celebration, she let out a laugh, sharp and bitter. "Wow, I can't believe this. You're trying to embarrass me in front of everyone." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence seemed to fuel her anger. She pushed back her chair and raised her arm dramatically. "Security." Her voice rang out across the dining room. Every head turned. The female guard started walking toward us, her black uniform crisp, her steps firm. My heart hammered in my chest. Jessica pointed straight at me as if I were some stranger off the street. "She's ruining the evening. She doesn't belong here. Get her out." I looked around the table, searching for even one person to stand up for me. My father rubbed his forehead. My mother kept staring at her plate. No one said a word. I felt the betrayal sink in, heavier than anything Jessica had said. It wasn't just her turning against me. It was everyone else choosing to stay silent. As the guard reached my side, the truth hit me harder than Jessica's words ever could. In that moment, I was completely alone. Ren was cleaning a table when Alyssa Grant, one of the restaurant guards, came toward her. Ren expected a nod or a strict reminder to keep working, but Alyssa leaned in and whispered, "I know what she's doing." Ren froze, unsure what Alyssa meant. The guard's eyes flicked toward the main dining area before returning to her. "Jessica didn't earn this place honestly," Alyssa said quietly. Ren felt a shock run through her. The restaurant had always seemed untouchable, and Jessica carried herself like she could do no wrong. Hearing this from a guard, someone who wasn't supposed to know anything, was jarring. Alyssa continued, her voice low but steady. "I used to work in restaurants. I've seen things people never talk about. I overheard Jessica making deals behind the scenes, deals that weren't fair. Backdoor stuff." Ren's stomach twisted with anger and disbelief. Everything she had believed about Jessica, and the restaurant felt uncertain now. She wanted to ask more, but Alyssa shook her head slightly, almost afraid of being over her. "I shouldn't say anything," Alyssa admitted, "but I couldn't just watch her destroy you. Don't let her do it." Ren's heart pounded. Guards were usually quiet and distant, yet here Alyssa was, warning her with seriousness and care. "She's not as untouchable as she thinks," Alyssa said. Then, without another word, she turned and disappeared into the shadows near the kitchen. Ren stepped outside, letting the cool air hit her face. The restaurant lights glowed behind her, familiar but suddenly distant. She felt shaken and small, yet a flicker of hope and determination had appeared. Alyssa's words were a warning, but they were also a spark. The fear and uncertainty were still there, but now they were joined by resolve. She thought about Jessica and the image of someone untouchable. Maybe that image wasn't true. If Alyssa knew, someone else could too. And if cracks existed in Jessica's armor, Ren might find a way through. She clenched her fists lightly, not with anger, but with determination. Ren walked away quietly, carrying Alyssa's warning and the small, bright spark it gave her. She didn't have a plan yet, but she felt ready. She wouldn't let Jessica destroy her. For the first time in a long while, Ren felt like she could fight back. I spent hours at my desk, going through old emails, texts, and notes I had saved from the time I was planning my own restaurant. Every message reminded me of the ideas I had worked on and the hours I had spent thinking about menus, designs, and business plans. As I looked closer, I noticed how some of my ideas had appeared in Jessica's restaurant. It was frustrating, but it also gave me a starting point. I realized that I could prove how she had taken what wasn't hers. Alyssa had agreed to help me, quietly and carefully. She gave me names of people who had seen or heard what Jessica was really doing. We met in quiet corners of coffee shops or behind closed doors, away from anyone who might recognize. I talked to former employees, suppliers, and other contacts. Each conversation gave me more pieces of the puzzle. I could see patterns in the way Jessica had manipulated people and used other people's work for her own gain. I started organizing everything. Emails, texts, and old notes went into folders. I copied contracts, saved messages, and wrote down details from the people I had spoken to. As I worked, the evidence began to form a clear picture of Jessica's actions: fraud, deception, and theft of ideas. The more I put together, the the more I felt that I was building something solid, something that could not be ignored. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of control. I had been powerless before, watching Jessica take credit for what I had worked so hard on. Now, with the proof I had collected and the help from Alyssa, I finally felt like I could fight back. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was prepared. Every day, as I went over the evidence and planned my next steps, my confidence grew. I could imagine confronting Jessica, not with anger, but with facts. I could see myself taking her down on my own terms, exposing everything she had done. The fear I had carried for so long was turning into determination. I knew the path wouldn't be easy, but I felt ready. For the first time, I had a plan, I had proof, and I had the power to stand up for myself. This was my chance to take control, and I wasn't going to waste it. I sat in the living room, my hands shaking slightly as I held the folder full of emails, texts, and notes I had collected. I took a deep breath and began showing everything to my parents. I explained each message, each contract, and every detail that proved Jessica had taken my ideas and used them for her own gain. I could see the surprise and doubt in their eyes, but I kept going, pointing to the evidence and explaining how I had gathered it. At first, my parents didn't believe me. My father frowned and said, "Ren, maybe this is just jealousy. You've been upset for a long time." My mother looked worried but nodded, her expression uncertain. I felt a pang of frustration but refused to give up. I opened the folder wider, showing the undeniable proof. Emails with her name on them, contracts that matched my ideas, messages from people who had witnessed her actions. Slowly, I saw their expressions change. The doubt and hesitation in their faces started to fade. My mother whispered, maybe she's not telling the truth about everything." Before long, Jessica arrived at the house, smiling as if nothing was wrong. She listened to what I said and laughed lightly. "Ren, you're making this up," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "All of this is fake. You're trying to ruin me." Her words were meant to confuse my parents and make them doubt me. The tension in the room grew. Some relatives immediately sided with Jessica, defending her blindly. "She couldn't do this. She's too careful," an aunt said, shaking her head. Others looked more closely at the evidence I had brought and began to see that something was wrong. They whispered to each other, debating quietly, unsure of who to believe. I felt the weight of the room pressing down on me. The family was clearly divided. Some were loyal to Jessica no matter what, while others started to understand the truth I had uncovered. I stayed calm, letting the facts speak for themselves. Even though the family was split, I felt a quiet strength growing inside me. I realized that as long as I held the truth, I had already won a small part of the fight. Some relatives might always support Jessica, but others were beginning to see the reality of what she had done. I felt a spark of hope and determination. I knew the path ahead would be difficult, but I also knew I wasn't alone. I had the evidence, and I had the courage to stand up for myself, no matter how divided the family became. I arrived at the restaurant for Jessica's dinner, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. She had organized it to show off, with family and investors sitting at long tables, all smiling and chatting as if everything was perfect. I carried my folder tightly, knowing that tonight was the night I would finally speak up. When the time felt right, I stood and asked everyone to listen. My voice was steady as I began laying out the evidence I had collected. I showed contracts, messages, and notes that proved Jessica had taken my ideas and used them for her own benefit. I spoke carefully, explaining each piece clearly so there could be no mistake. I included accounts from witnesses who had seen or heard how she manipulated situations. Jessica sat at the head of the table, trying to smile and maintain control, but I could see her eyes narrow. As I continued, she shifted in her seat, her smile faltering. Finally, she could no longer hide her frustration. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, pointing at me. "You've made all of this up. You're trying to ruin me in front of everyone." Her voice shook slightly, betraying her anger. She started insulting me, calling me names and questioning my character. Each word she spoke revealed her cruelty, the way she treated people to get what she wanted. It was hard to hear, but it also strengthened my resolve. I stayed calm, letting the evidence speak louder than her words. Alyssa, who had stayed quietly at the edge of the room, stepped forward at just the right moment. She confirmed the details I had shared, explaining what she had seen and heard herself. Her support was subtle but powerful. Seeing her back me up gave me courage, and it made the evidence even harder for everyone to ignore. I noticed the investors' expressions changing as I presented everything. Shock turned to anger. Some of them whispered to each other, shaking their heads, while others stood silently, clearly upset. Jessica tried to interrupt, but her voice had lost its strength. The more she tried to control the situation, the more she revealed her dishonesty and cruelty. By the end of the evening, the atmosphere had completely shifted. Investors walked away, furious with Jessica, leaving her alone at the table. Family members looked at her differently, some shocked, others questioning what they had believed. I felt a strange mix of relief and triumph. I had finally shown the truth in front of everyone, with evidence and witnesses to back me up. For the first time, I could see the power of standing up for myself and proving what was right. Jessica's world started to fall apart quickly. Investors who had once praised her and trusted her money began to pull out, leaving her business shaky and exposed. The restaurant that had seemed untouchable started losing customers. Her carefully built reputation crumbled as more people learned the truth about how she had manipulated, deceived, and stolen from others. Everywhere she went, whispers followed her. It was a sudden and harsh change, and it could not be hidden. I watched from the sidelines, feeling a sense of relief rather than triumph. I hadn't done this to enjoy her failure or to see her suffer. I simply wanted the truth to be recognized and for her dishonesty to be exposed. That truth had weight, and finally, the consequences were clear for everyone to see. It was justice, not joy, that filled me as the world she had built began to collapse. When I returned home, my parents were waiting, their faces heavy with guilt. "Ren, we should have believed you from the start," my mother said softly. My father nodded, his voice quiet and apologetic. I listened, feeling the sting of their disbelief still fresh. Their words were meaningful, but forgiveness didn't come quickly. I knew trust had been broken, and that it would take time to repair. Still, I let them speak, and I let myself acknowledge that they were trying. Later, Alyssa found me in a quiet corner of the house. She gave me a small smile and placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You didn't give up, and you stood your ground." I felt a warmth at her words, the support of someone who had believed in me when so many others had not. We didn't need to say much more. The quiet moment itself was enough. As I sat alone that night, I thought about everything that had happened. The anger and desire for revenge that had driven me were no longer the focus. Instead, I felt the calm satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. I hadn't been looking for happiness in her downfall. My goal had always been to reclaim my ideas, my dignity, and my place in the world. I realized that I could finally step out of her shadow, free to pursue my own path without fear or interference. For the first time, I felt a quiet strength in myself. Revenge had not brought joy, but it had brought balance and fairness. That, I decided, was enough. I could move forward, not with anger or bitterness, but with a clear sense of who I was and what I deserved. What would you have done if someone stole your dreams like Jessica did to Ren? Did Ren make the right choice by confronting the truth, or was there another way? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more gripping stories.